Because I was already. We all have confidence, yes, yeah.
When you settle in and
Yeah. Well, I am. Probably once a week.
okay. Let us know when you're down.
Yeah.
We can,
Yeah.
It's great to see you.
Of course.
Oh, I wouldn't miss you guys were such an amazing. Tina and the rest of the team establishing. Yeah. Did you meet my colleague? No.
All right.
So I want to welcome everybody here to the Brookings Institution for this amazing event. I'm Camille Busette, former senior fellow here at Brookings, and I worked with Keon Gilbert here, Dr. Keon Gilbert, on this project, and I'm going to turn things over to him.
Good afternoon and welcome to our event today. What we will plan to do is spend a little bit of time just talking a little bit about our project. We have two panels set up today. We'll talk to members of the community partners that we work with and also some of the participants that were part of the Wellbeing and Wellness and Black Life Project. And I think there are some slides here. Hopefully.
It's not showing up there.
No, it's not.
But you know what? That's okay.
It's possible I broke it. Absolutely.
Well, you can actually leave it on there and
Okay.
then, yeah. So I want to say a couple words about why we did this project and what it is. So we spent some time in previous work looking at the ways in which Black men support themselves, Black men and Black boys support themselves as a community. And in doing that kind of work, we really wanted to hear a little bit more directly from Black men and Black boys in communities about what it really means to experience well-being. And so, of course, the best way to do that is to actually ask people. But we are the Brookings institution. It's a little hard for us to go in and say, convene people and have them trust us. So one of the things that we have done, as we've done in previous work, is we actually identified and worked with some amazing partners to help us work with community members to have a series of conversations about what it means to experience well-being and how we can further support that for Black men and Black boys. So we had 4 partners for this work, 2 partners in Arkansas. We worked with Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Central Arkansas, headed up by Kristen Kunisvest. And we also had participating in and leading those conversations, Ashley King, who's a news anchor at Fox 16 News, and she was the community conversation facilitator for them. We also had the pleasure of working with the Urban League of Arkansas and with Scott Hamilton and Maxwell Brown. Scott Hamilton is the CEO and president of the Urban League, and he joins us today, and Maxwell Brown, who's the director of programs. And we had the pleasure of working with Kevin Hunt, who's the executive director of Inspiring Other People Community Conversation. He was also the community conversation facilitator. Our third partner was the Montgomery County Collaboration Council. And here we had the pleasure of working with Elijah Wheeler, Sela Gebre Christos, and Joe Hooks. We also had expert facilitation from Dr. David Miller and Sadiq Ali. Fantastic partners there. And then our final partner, and also amazing, as part of the Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs. Thank you so much. Tina Suleiman, who's the Senior Program Officer there, and August Summer. And Tina's here today. And we also had Shako Barros, who was who connected us with the Center for Communication Program, and he's the co-executive director of the Hayward Burns Institute.
Great. And from the Brookings team, Camille Bousset, myself, LNA Travakin, Carly Bennett, and Jarrell Kai. So we want to thank everyone for their participation in helping to pull this project together. It's been a multi-year process, as Camille has mentioned, in terms of thinking about how to not only conceptualize the work itself, how to partner with our organizations. We'll talk a little bit more about some of that during one of the panels. But I do want to let everyone know, not everyone said yes when we reached out to partners, and for lots of various reasons. We were asking for a considerable amount of commitment and time and effort for organizations to help facilitate this work in communities.
So I just want to say that what you are going to see here, I think you're going to find is extremely moving. I think you're also going to find that there's so much more work to do. And you're also going to find that we really had fantastic partners. And again, a huge thank you to all of you for that. I'm going to let Keon take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille. So I'm just going to give you some highlights of a little bit about the project itself and some highlights of some of our findings. So overall, as Camille mentioned, we launched this project in 3 communities, Montgomery County, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Baltimore, Maryland, to ask the question, how do Black men and boys define well-being? And in partnering with these organizations, we thought about generating some indicators as well that will lead to policy innovations at municipal and federal levels. So we wanted to make sure that this work elevated the voices and experiences of community members who are working to support and provide services to Black men and boys to overall enhance the quality of life. Also, we wanted to make sure that we focused on ensuring that communities had shared ownership of the project. As Camille mentioned, that we're here in Washington, D.C., and we wanted to make sure that the work was, those that we worked with were trustworthy partners, and them understanding that they were going to own the process as much as possible, and make sure that this was a co-learning project as well. So we wanted to make sure that there were also ways to connect with these partners so that this work would be sustainable and live past the project cycle. Also, we want to make sure that this work informs public policy discussions and decision making about what are the best ways to invest in well-being for Black boys and Black men and other communities of color across the U.S. So we set up these conversations in a way of thinking about 4 conversations. So one of the first conversations is thinking about how can we build rapport? How can we build community in each of the community sites? So the first session was really sort of thinking about asking participants to not only talk to us about what was important to them, but what were some of the general ideas about how they wanted to define well-being, and to offer up some initial reflections on what well-being was for them and for their community. The second conversation was established to really think through expressions and examples of well-being. And so for black boys and Black men, so asking lots of questions about not only what it is, but what does it look like? And sometimes people brought artifacts, brought pictures, brought other ways to represent what well-being meant for them and looked like in their communities. The third conversation was to think about supportive structures, supportive community members, supportive partners, and other organizations in each site as a way of, again, thinking about this idea of sustainability. So how do we connect with existing partners? How do we connect with existing organizations as a way of making sure that we can find different levers to influence well-being and enhance it for Black boys and Black men in each community? And then finally, the last conversation was focused on solutions. So thinking about not only programs and services, but to start generating some ideas about policy recommendations and policy solutions. And so we really spent a lot of time over the course of these conversations really thinking about not only definitions and ideas and concepts, but really moving towards action. That was something that was very important to us at the beginning of this work, and that was impressed upon us not only by our partners, but our advisory group as well. So really quickly, we had about a sample of 182. As you can see, here's an age distribution. So most folks were between 30 and 65. So we invited individuals who were 18 and older. For lots of different reasons, we focused on that population. For those of you who have been engaged in social science or clinical research, you understand it's a little bit challenging to recruit minors because you also are recruiting their parents and their guardians as well. So most of our participants were Black or African American, and of course, most of our participants were males, but we did have one community partner in particular that had a higher number of female participants. So as you can see, quick distribution of monthly income. I'm moving a little bit fast just for the sake of time. And so through these community conversations, we derived a few dimensions of well-being: the individual level, family, community collective, narratives of well-being, mental and physical health, resources, and then strategies to enhance well-being. These dimensions will also be used in a survey instrument that we have developed. So a few conversation highlights. So defining well-being at the individual level. Well-being was defined at an individual level by how participants understood their authentic identity, how they defined their purpose and place in life. Also the idea of thinking about acquiring new skills and having access to resources and combining them with support from others, faith, good health, and the capacity to persevere. Many participants felt that this was a way to meet the basic needs in life and to be successful. And here are some examples of what participants said. I believe defining well-being is just being in a place in life where you can live in your truth and not have to really be worried about or concerned about just being you. Another example, well-being to me means that basic needs are met and I'm able to focus on things that I care about to help me grow as a person and those that I love, my family, friends, and so forth. Another part of this idea of well-being was really sort of thinking about who Black men were connected to and ensuring that the connection not only was sustained, but expanded. So that takes us to family well-being, thinking about the ways that participants really talked about the meaning of family and some of the benefits and also some of the challenges that they experienced growing up, and sort of what family really meant to them and the families that they would like to build, and for other Black boys to build as they move forward and to start thinking about family planning. A few examples. I think one part of well-being is having a good support system. In addition to everything else everyone's just saying. I think a lot of things that we overlook is history. Well, not just history of Black people in general, but your own family. So I think we have a sense of where you come from. So you have more sense and pride in where you want to go, and I think a lot of our youth don't know where they come from. And also sort of thinking about family in terms of generations, and also making sure that people remain connected to not only their family history, but the history that comes from the communities that they live in. Community and collective well-being. Many participants really talked about the impact of well-being for Black boys and men, being directly influenced by their community, and how community also becomes your broader family. Community includes the organizations and people that provide resources for support, and most importantly, safety and the freedom to be vulnerable. This idea of vulnerability came up many times throughout our conversations, and making sure that there were spaces and places and individuals that could help provide a sense of vulnerability or free space for Black men and boys to be vulnerable and to be free. A few examples. So if you're not in community, then you don't get better. That's where your resources find yourself. When I think about fraternities and sororities, when I think about gangs, when I think about all of the various different things, it was built in and around community. Much of what lacks in our community today is the lack of community because the reality that many of our families are transient. Also, really quickly, so wellness to me is community. It really is. I keep seeking out people and just seeking out that communal living because every time I have that, I feel safe and I feel well. So another big part of our project was to sort of rethink or reimagine narratives of Black men and boys. We recognize that many narratives have been derogatory towards Black men and have framed and often limited access to opportunity for Black men and boys. We spent a lot of time in these conversations across each site really thinking about not only what are the negative narratives, but what are ways and strategies to reshape and reimagine those narratives. So a few examples. I believe one of the main barriers and hindrance for Black men and boys is the narrative. I believe that they come up with a narrative of having to be strong, having to just grind hard and get through it. There's not a lot of nurturance of them and just gentle care for them. They're not taught about emotional intelligence. They don't get to cry. They don't get to be sad. Another one, we have to deprogram what we have been programmed to be for so many years. It's going to take behavioral change, and that takes time. Right now, Black men in Baltimore, the men are just existing. They're doing what they have to do to take care of their family, get the money, and do the daggone thing. But thriving is not only care of yourself in a positive way, they can go and transition from generation to generation, and doing that will break some of these generational curses. That way we have been bestowed upon for so many years. As you can also see, not only thinking about how to overcome these negative stereotypes and narratives about Black men and boys, but being proactive in terms of building new narratives and new stories about who Black men are as examples of resilience and thriving. So there are lots of examples of safe places and individuals and groups and networks that Black men identified in the project. So there was no universal set of examples. So family, friends, partners, spouses, mentors, role models, church leaders, coaches, and teachers. And also thinking about the importance of home, making sure that home was a safe space, as well as different examples of education, church places and places of worship, youth programs and fraternities. These were all a set of examples that came up. So moving towards thinking about solutions, there were a number of examples of recommendations to enhance well-being programs and policies. So thinking about financial literacy, education and training opportunities outside of four-year colleges, mentorship examples across different life stages became really important. Maintaining and increasing different examples of support for young people, building the capacity of existing programs and organizations in the programs and services that they're already providing. Also ensuring that we're supporting and creating safe spaces for Black men and boys to feel safe and vulnerable. Programs to address physical and mental health, workforce development, closing many of the barriers to access and participation in programs and services such as transportation. Ensuring that programs and services are meeting the needs of the community with an adequate amount of resources, and even thinking about redistributing resources that already exist in some of our communities. A few of the next steps. So thinking about different ways to support Black boys and men across various life stages, ensuring that we have formats for open discussion, community building, social and emotional development, engaging in regular conversations and discussions about programs, services, and policies that are effective, and also finding tools to measure and assess that success. Each community was really interested in identifying local community-driven, local-driven community policy agenda to enhance well-being, creating a model for sustainability, and to disseminate practices and lessons learned from this project to other organizations in their community. Creating training and co-learning opportunities to influence policymakers, funders, which can help scale up this work, as well as disseminate what we've learned to other communities. And then finally, more partnerships and collaborations are needed to implement a well-being strategy and agenda for Black boys and Black men. Couple ways that people have described the impact of this project. Spaces like this where true healing can take place have the power to transform the old adage into something greater. Healed people can heal people. And the second quote, one of the consistent themes we've heard throughout the sessions is the lack of emotionally and physically safe spaces for Black men in Montgomery County to come together, network, and share. I would love for this research and these conversations to result in a guide or a blueprint for how other organizations and anchor institutions, especially those based in Black communities or led by Black people, can create, host, and facilitate authentic spaces for Black men to simply exist without judgment. And I think that is a great way to segue into the next part of our program and to our panels. So we'll have a conversation with organization leaders from our community partners. So we're going to take a quick break to be able to do that. All right? Great. Thank you. So I'm going to call our first panel up, Elijah, Tina, Scott. And welcome. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate all of the work that you have put into the Wellness and Black Life Project and partnering with us. And as I mentioned, not everyone said yes, so we thank you for saying yes quite a while ago to work on this initiative. And just maybe as a quick way of introducing yourselves and talking a little bit about your organizations, tell us who you are, what organization you represent, and thinking about your work and how it has addressed this concept of well-being previously.
Okay, well, I'll start. And thank you all for putting this together. It was certainly an exercise that we learned a lot from. So I thank the Brookings Institute and the team for putting this together. My name is Scott Hamilton. I'm the CEO and president of the Urban League of the state of Arkansas. And we're one of the oldest civil rights and economic development organizations in the country, originally formed in 1910. And so our objective is really working with folk, any kind of folk, to thrive. We focus in health, we focus in education, entrepreneurship, jobs, if you will. Health is one of the big focus that we have. And then we want to make sure home ownership is something that folks can have access to. We've done this for many, many years. We used to do it where you'd come into a community and walk into an office, there'd be 4 desks with those topics I just talked about. Now we just do it electronically. The need is still here. The need is getting greater, in our opinion, and we are really excited about being able to participate.
Thank you, Scott. Tina?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. And I'm really proud to represent Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Program, where I am a senior program officer. We at Johns Hopkins Center for Communication Programs, which I'll refer to as CCP moving forward, we utilize a participatory community partnered approach to develop and design health strategies that are rooted in a truth that lived experience is expertise. And so we have worked in Black communities all over the globe, and very importantly and proudly in Baltimore City, in our backyard. And some of the initiatives that we've worked on related to well-being have been through our partnership with the Baltimore City Health Department, and we've worked through harm reduction, infant mortality reduction, and adolescent health initiatives, for example. And what we've learned in that work is that men are critical to these efforts, yet the prioritization does not often match the importance of their voices in this work. And, you know, one example we think of often is maternal and child health initiatives, that even in name, there's a signal of erasure of men, right? And so what we've done is we've worked with partners in Baltimore City to really elevate and intentionally include and amplify and make visible men in Baltimore, and because their inclusion strengthens families and communities.
Thank you.
Peace and good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Shout out to Keon and Camille for partnering with us in Montgomery County, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. My name is Elijah Wheeler. I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the Collaboration Council, where we are the local management board, which is very unique to the state of Maryland. Each of the 24 jurisdictions has a local management board, where our primary responsibility is to work with the state and the county to ensure that we effectively deploy funds into communities to redress a lot of the local issues. One of the main things that we also try to do is work also with private institutions as well too, to ensure that people are not working in silos and coming together to really redress a lot of the needs in community. When it comes to well-being, we've done things and funded programs that run the gamut, from out-of-school time programs that really address a lot of the issues and needs that our young people have. You'll hear from a partner of ours in the second panel, Joe Hooks with 480 Club, all the way to guaranteed income. Believe it or not, making sure that people have access unfettered to dollars is a form of well-being, to ensure that people are taken care of in their communities and not dealing with any kind of issues when it comes to cash. So this was very unique for us because this was the first time that we were able to work with a partner where we could specifically work in and with the Black community to redress a lot of the issues that we face as Black men. So really happy about that.
And thank you all for being here and joining us today. So when we were thinking about who we would like to partner with, we, went through the literature and we thought about what are some of the best places to think about. And we came across a few studies, and one in particular that looked at 66 counties, or identified 66 counties where life expectancy for Black men was higher than the national average. So all of your communities were on that list for a number of reasons, in terms of not only thinking about opportunities for social mobility, many of them being either close to or having former military installations, and also a population of elderly civilian veterans as well. So as we sort of combed through and started narrowing down our list and thinking about partners and thinking about organizations that we would like to work with, we started to recognize a pattern and theme in terms of thinking about organizations that possibly had the capacity to do this work. And you all have already spoke to some of that. And when we first approached you to have this conversation about working with us, what were some of the important decision points that you considered in terms of moving towards a partnership?
I guess I'll start in order. Okay. Yeah. So when we first got the call in Arkansas, we were shocked, and particularly when we learned the other communities, and we said, how in the heck did Arkansas, particularly Little Rock, Arkansas, get lumped in much larger communities? But as we talked and we really worked towards understanding it, and I think I shared with you, Keon, we spent probably 2 days literally tried to understand the question that was asked. And we eliminated a few folks that had some ideas that we didn't think made much sense. But I think we narrowed it down where we began to understand what we now understand as the critical nature of what our demographics look like in Arkansas and Little Rock in particular. So we spent a lot of time. We were very excited. We were pleased because the type work we do at the Urban League is in this space. We're constantly engaged with young black males in the work we do. When we see where need is, very often, as you can imagine, young black males are right at the top of that list. So we were just absolutely excited and thrilled.
Great. Yeah. And first, I want to open up by expressing gratitude for our colleagues at Burns Institute for connecting us into this opportunity. When we first connected with Brookings, we were really excited by the opportunity to be able to center Black men and boys in this initiative because it's so rare. As I mentioned before, especially in some of the health initiatives that we work on, because of program design or funding structures, oftentimes if men are considered, it's usually as a secondary or an afterthought. And so that was very values aligned and aligned with a direction that we wanted to go in terms of engaging more deeply with Black men in Baltimore City. We also appreciated that Brookings had a very locally defined approach to this and very strength-based. And so the understanding that, we are a very diverse set of jurisdictions and, we're able to engage with our communities the way that we understand them. And so that was a very important decision point for us. And then we felt aligned on principles and values, especially around a participatory ethos and the priorities of elevating safety and dignity and intersectionality, that there's more than one way to be a Black man, and accountability, very importantly. So when we joined this project, we joined not just we're kind of coming on and we're going to get this work done, but we're joining an effort and a broader collaboration that respected local context and the full humanity and dignity of Baltimore's Black men.
Echoing some of the things that Tina just said, I think, the first thing that really came to mind for us was that we were aligned as in terms of our values, at least our stated values, right? We wanted to see if those stated values would actually be met as we got a little bit further into the work, and they were, pleasantly so. So we were really happy about that. Another thing was ensuring that this wasn't deficit-based. So often when we talk about Black men and Black boys, it's about what's wrong with us or what's not working. It's never about what we see as being what's right with us or what is actually working for us. And so that was really a strong selling point. And this is where the Keep It Real section of the conversation starts. The fact that Black folks approached me about this was really important, right? So looking at Keon and Camille, so often I find myself in spaces talking about Black men and Black boys and Black people in general with people who don't look like me, who don't share my experiences. So there's a sense of judgment that's really cast there. That's really uncomfortable, frankly speaking. I think we've all heard the term like don't air dirty laundry and all that kind of thing, right? And it's not even so much about dirty laundry. It's about the fact that if you can't understand my experiences, why are we having this conversation, right? And so just as a sign of respect, knowing that other Black folks were going to be in this space working with us was really important to us because we knew that we shared like experiences. So that really stood out to me and to us.
Yeah, I remember that moment when one of our first conversations with you, you were pleasantly surprised to realize that we were Black. Because you're right. I mean, many people who have done some of this work do not look and reflect the Black men and Black boys in a lot of different ways, or even really respect to listen to their experiences and to learn with and from them. And so I think we both appreciated the acknowledgement of that and recognition as well. So as you think about moving forward with this partnership and thinking about how you were going to approach recruitment and of participants, what were some of the key principles and ideas that really generated? And part of the reason I ask that question is, as you all have mentioned, Black men and boys are often not centered in projects in lots of different ways, and certainly in research, and certainly not from a participatory perspective. And so what were some things that you started to think about in terms of how you were going to reach out to various communities? And we can go in any order, it doesn't matter.
Happy to go first. So that was a tough challenge. We spent some time to address because of the importance of long-term participation, continuity in the participants. We spent a lot of time to think about how would we do that. We didn't want to just do kind of an open call where folks would come to one session and not come back. So we were very intentional, if you will, in some of the key folks that we reached out to. These are folks that we've had relationships through the Urban League organization. So they knew us, right? And they knew that the minute we put this call out, they were excited because it fit the type things that we've always talked about and preached about, if you will. And then we expanded. We looked at some of our HBCUs. We looked at the reach those folks had. And then we did intentionally try to find folks that we did not know. So we did some very limited open call, but we wanted to have a mixture in that room where, not everyone knew everyone. Now, I can tell you, in 2 sessions, everybody knew everyone, and we still hang out. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of work to make sure that we wanted to have consistency because we knew this was going to be a journey and not just a one-time conversation.
So in Baltimore, so first our recruitment and retention was sort of baked into the design of the conversations themselves. So we leaned into our strengths at CCP related to human-centered design and used a format that was a hackathon. So it's a 2-day, full-day design sprint, essentially, that's based in utilizing activities that are based in creativity and joy to unearth these insights. And so we found that in terms of retention, this has been very successful in Baltimore City because it's the consecutive days, people are more likely to come back. And also because it's fun, it's joyful, it builds connection, people are excited to come back. They're excited to see each other again, and they're excited to kind of have this shared purpose with each other. And so we were able to retain people in that way. In terms of the recruitment, people are familiar in Baltimore with our we use hackathons quite a bit. And so our recruitment was very relationship based. So we reached out to partners that we've worked with before, told them about the opportunity. They were very excited to do this. And so we found some participants that way. And we also brought on board a community outreach specialist for this particular purpose who used his network to bring other men on board. And he also was a participant. So he was it entered the space with vulnerability, which gave permission for others to also be honest and comfortable in the space as well. In terms of recruitment, we also really were elevating, again, intersectionality. So we ended up with a very diverse mix of people that represented men who are LGBTQ, men who are fathers, who are navigating reentry programs, and also we had women too who are not obviously men themselves, but love and care for Black men. So,
I think for us, it was relatively. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it was pretty easy. One of our values is community aligned systems, meaning that we make sure that we work with systems and organizations that are responsive to and engaging with the folks who are most impacted by the decisions that they make. For me specifically, I'm not from Montgomery County originally. I'm from Cleveland. And though I lived in Montgomery County for 15 plus years, I was going to find any way to get Cleveland in there. Sadiq knows that. And though I've lived in Montgomery County for 15 plus years, it was important to me that when we started talking about recruitment, that we worked with someone who really had deep ties and roots in the community. And so it was really easy for me to say, hey, Joe, 480 Club, I need to work with you. Like, you're the main person that I can think of right now that has these connections to men in Montgomery County. Joe says something and everyone listens because he has a certain level of trust that he's built over a number of years with the work that he does and continues to do. So I think from that aspect, it was really good. we also have stated values around community organizing, so much so that we have a community organizer on staff. Shout out to Sella, who's not here with us today. But it's important to also make sure that you're matching your statements with your actions. So I think when people see that you have a community organizer on staff, they also understand that you understand the importance of engaging effectively and authentically with community.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that trust was a critical part to this work, to this project, and you all really thought about that, I think, pretty clearly. And some of that even factored into who you also selected to be facilitators and how that helped to really sort of drive the process and actually really become a really important part to people returning, I think. Can you talk a little bit about sort of some of the facilitation process?
Yeah, certainly. Shout out to Cleveland. The National Urban League just hosted its annual conference in Cleveland. Cleveland's nice. So, yeah, trust was a big issue early on. We had some really deep conversations, even as deep as that some of the Brookings representatives that were in the room because they were not African-American males. And there were those that actually in the first session, kind of talked about that. We had talked about that early on. And in our invitation process, we talked about that this would be, quote, a safe space. So building that trust, I think, was critical. Well, every time you see us, we all hug everybody, so including all the Brookings Institute folks. But I think the trust factor was key because the dynamics in the room, we wanted to create that comfort where folks really would open up and share some of their deeper concerns, issues, and we knew that was important. And I believe we developed that. Our moderator was a young man that has a company that works with young African-American men in the Arkansas area. And so he led much of the discussion based on experience and some of the things that he'd seen. So we were excited to have someone that had been in that space that could help us navigate those times and points where trust was an issue. We had LGBTQ community. We had, you name it, we had to cross the gamut. And so again, the emphasis of being able to get the folks to open up was, I think, absolutely critical. And we all learned quite a bit.
Thank you.
So I think for us, a lot of the trust was built through the format and the structure of the actual workshops that we did, that the creativity and the activities that we included were very important to building that trust and encouraging people to let their guard down. For example, we translated the discussion guide into activities that, again, were meant to be joyful and encourage multiple modes of participation. So yes, you can speak your contributions, but you can also draw a picture or you can write it down so that, and we, as facilitators, immediately validate those contributions and try to affirm individual strengths within the groups that they're working in. And we found that that helps to build a lot of the trust. I think also as facilitators and as representatives of an institution in Baltimore and research institution in particular, we have to be willing to be open and accountable and receive feedback. And we did. We got to a point where our participants, and I see one of our co-facilitators in the back smiling because that we received very, very important truths about Johns Hopkins and about how research has been conducted in Baltimore. And, this is something that we commit to as an institution, and as I can say specifically for CCP, that we commit to healing and accountability in that way. And we embraced those, what felt like maybe harsh truths, as a sign of respect and trust and an opportunity for accountability too.
Again, for us, we had two facilitators, Dr. David Miller and Sadiq Ali, who's here with us today, who'll be facilitating the second panel. It's about authenticity, I think, in many ways. For other black men in the room, have you ever met a black man that made you feel really proud to be a black man? That's what Sadiq has done for me. I don't think I've ever told him that I'm trying to contain myself right now, but we're friends and we've gone back for a number of years. But I remember my first time meeting Sadiq and walking away and just being impressed. I'm like, brother's just real. He's authentic, right? And there's a way about him that allows for you to kind of let down your guard naturally. He doesn't pry, he's not intrusive, but he really gets you to think, right, deeply and introspectively, about the things that you say, the things that you do. He, in many ways, has given me permission to be as authentic as I am today, whether or not he knows that. And for me, when it came to the facilitation, it was having him in the room be that symbol for other Black men that they could trust and that they could let down their guard and that this space was safe for them, right, in many ways. So I think that that was a key, and that also really helped it to open up in many ways that I don't think other people in other spaces have ever opened up before. So that was really important.
Yeah, I mean, being in those rooms and being in the spaces, every partner, every community conversation, I think was an opportunity to expand upon not only thinking about trust, but how to show up authentically each time. And each community sort of operated that a little bit differently, which I think was really important and really, in many ways, just amazing to just kind of see and witness and to be there. One idea that just really sort of just pops in my mind, and I hope Sadiq talks about this, is the last session in that circle. And I think we maybe had a picture of it earlier, and I hope you talk about the circle on your panel. But it really does speak to this idea of every conversation, every group wanted to know, well, what's next? And, so we're going to raise that question now in the few minutes that we have remaining before we go to questions, is thinking about your organization and how to sustain this work. What then becomes next for this work?
Yeah, that absolutely was the cry, if you will, at the end of our sessions, because we got into a cadence where our participants were looking forward to it. I mean, they were showing up early, and so they were helping us set up food and things like that. But I think what's next for us is a continuum of what the Urban League is all about. When we look at Black men and Black boys in our community in particular, we've got 94 affiliates across the country. So when we look at every state, when we as leaders of the organizations get together, that is the conversation. How do we address? How do we make sure that these environments that we were able to create in just that short time frame, that we can continue, because they were safe spaces, they were trusted spaces. Those were the things that we heard ad nauseum. First session was kind of, Second session, we started getting deep. Third session, they had no clue there were cameras, mics, or anything. These conversations got deep. We must keep that going, because typically a Black man walks into any environment and you're kind of one in very few. And those spaces do not allow, and I love the word authenticity, in terms of what we're really thinking, what's really going on in our mind, what our real fears are, what our real concerns are, what our real objectives are. And what we found is that, leave us alone. Give us access that this country is supposed to promise us, right? Give us the opportunity to be creative, to feel safe, to be able to thrive and do the things that we naturally can do. But if you've got the weight of this society that has created so many different impediments to be authentic, to be honest, to be real, it's a big problem. So our work is continuing that. We've got some programs that we're moving forward. We've actually coined several. One's called Steps to Success. We're going to talk to our younger Black men and boys about programs, or pretty much any young folks in our community. And we've got a new one that's going to come out where we're going to have sessions where we're going to do 5-on-5s, 5 white people, 5 Black people, and just a straight up conversation. No politics. Or we'll do our best not to have politics. But the conversations will be that opportunity to say, hey, I've always wondered. Look at something and see how we can all look at something and have a very different perspective. I think that's critical, especially in the time that we are now, that people begin to understand how folks that don't look like you, that have a different background, we see things very differently. And it's not a bad thing, because we're made up of our experiences. We're made up with what we come involved with. That is a direct effect of what we got from the program, is to continue conversations, because what we learned is that simple conversation can solve many, many issues.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm going to yes and Scott here. One of the pieces that we found and that was really important that came out in the conversation is a strong desire for connection. That, society right now, there is a loneliness epidemic. People feel isolated, and that's acutely felt by Black men and boys. And it's systemic, right? Even there are policies that disconnect and dehumanize. And so we need to mainstream in our path forward, in our programming, and in continuing to create spaces, we need to mainstream connection as much as we can. I think also, we have this cohort, and what we found and learned in this is that the process itself became intervention. That there was, as Scott said, there is this connection, is people, these relationships that they formed with each other, they want to continue them. And that piece around is highlighting how important and how primary connection needs to be in policy and in programs. And one thing that we can say for ourselves, Baltimore has a very rich ecosystem of programs, of universities, of both organic, such as barbershops, and more organized, like fatherhood classes and men's mental health days and that sort of thing. And so how can we pool our resources and work together? Sometimes, we need deeper collaboration, I think, in these spaces, and we're really committed to doing that. And, finally, what I'll say is that there is, in well-being, and something that we heard, there's, of course, well is a key word, but there's a key word around being, right? There's a fundamental need that was expressed by our participants to have the freedom to show up fully as themselves and be vulnerable and make mistakes and still be treated with dignity and respect. And so we have a responsibility to continue to use whatever power, will, and skills we can to counterbalance isolation and create spaces where Black men and boys can truly and freely be.
A binary response, if you will, as in terms of what's next, I don't think that's for us to answer. I think that's for philanthropic entities to answer. We need money to continue to do this work. We can't do it for free. That's the bottom line. A lot of times folks want to give you pennies on the dollar and say, go serve 1,000 people. That's not only unfair, it's disrespectful, frankly speaking. I see us spending more money on dog parks than we do on well-being for Black men and boys. We haven't seen anything at the national level done to address the needs of Black boys, specifically since President Obama with My Brother's Keeper. Once he left office, that really dissipated to a great extent. And so I think we need our private philanthropic partners to really step up and to stop talking and tweeting and fund. That's important so that we can continue to keep these conversations and engagements going. Secondarily, I think we have to be very specific and call it for what it is. I know brother said, try to stay away from politics, but I'm, going right into it. With this current administration and the attack on the federal workforce, make no mistake about it, this is an anti-Black action, especially here in the D.C. area. This is meant to uproot and to destroy the lives of middle-class federal Black workers, right? Disproportionately Black workers in this region who are struggling right now in this moment, right? So we've got to create opportunities and spaces specifically for Black men and boys to be able to have restoration. The first part of that is rest. Black men are tired, and we are not allowed to say that we're tired, right? For many reasons, because we've been socialized to believe that if we say that we're tired, that's a sign of weakness. That is unfair. We're struggling. We're having strokes at an early age. We're suffering from high blood pressure, anxiety, and all these other things that we carry silently as a result of the way that we are socialized to navigate these spaces. So again, we need our private philanthropic partners to step up and to match everything that they state with dollars. And it can't be, the 3% that they typically do. We need them to go up to 6% so that we can keep this going. And we need spaces where Black men can, to the sister's point, just be. That's important.
Great. Before we start going to questions from the audience and from our online participants, One of the questions that definitely has come up in not only our, the conversations themselves, but as we were preparing for this event, is how has the federal climate, the policy climate, altered or will shape or influence, the lessons learned and the potential impact of this. So I don't know if Scott and Tina, or if you want to add more, Elijah, as folks start getting ready to ask their questions from the audience.
And I appreciate your point. You're right. We need money. The reality is we're not going to get money. And so part of the program that I talked about, the kind of 5-on-5, is to do just that. Is to use leverage. Is to start to share the stories. Because if we wait for society to do what society should be doing for society, which encompasses all of us, we're going to be waiting a long time. So I think that we have to figure out creative ways to have society as a whole begin to look at this as an epidemic. South Africa ended apartheid in the early mid-90s. We're still in it. It's still called Jim Crow. We call it Jimmy Crow right now. It's the grandson. And so the things that we're seeing currently in this administration are highlighting. I thank them for that because the issues are horrible. And what we're seeing going on in our country is one that I think that everyone better pay attention to, because if it's not just black folks, it's not just our brown sisters and brothers, it's this whole society. And we are moving in a space that cannot move forward in a manner that can sustain this country. So I think the conversations, believe me, we need the money, but I think we have to figure out ways to get the larger number of folks in this country to begin to recognize the issues that we've experienced for many, many, many years, but how now those same issues are starting to permeate this whole country.
I'm just gonna say amen. Like that's I don't have anything to add.
All right, we'll start with questions from the audience. Is there a mic or a hand right here?
Hello? Okay. Thank you for this. I have a ton of comments. I'm gonna keep just one question for y'all. And I think it connects to the last point that y'all just made. Sorry, I should have mentioned too. Andrew Thompson from UPenn, professor of political science there. Okay, so you kind of led Tina specifically, like you left on Tina, correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure. You said the process became the intervention. And I'm thinking about this with what y'all ended on when it comes to thinking about like what interventions could look like, or what is after this. And I'm thinking about it in this kind of like binary context of like process versus outcome driven. Mm-hmm. And I want to hear what y'all have to say about the way that respondents in this study were sort of reacting to just being able to just being given the space to engage with one another, and that being the thing that's prioritized, and then thinking about that versus a sort of outcome-driven, let's get folks together and then publicize to whatever donors, whatever sort of policymakers, this as like an educational outcome, something of the sort. Because what I'm getting at is like on that process level, you can't really capture that with empirics in the same way that you can capture the other sets of direct policy outcomes, and that seems to be a real problem and tension here. Because what we're talking about on the whole is like an erosion of Black male civil society, and really being able to like capture that and articulate it to other folks. It just seems like it's hard for me to wrap my head around, and I just want to hear what y'all have to say. Thanks.
Actually, you can pass it down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike. Oh,
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I'm Andrew. Thank you, and then higher ed is paying off for you, man. God, so you put so many points out there. We're gonna be here for a little while. I love what you said, because it becomes process versus outcome. I'm a process person by nature, and I rarely, my wife hates it, but I rarely have an end game or an outcome. It's just like wherever we show up, because at the end of the day, I'm that type person is that if you put the work into it, if you have an idea of where you're going, stop and stay with the process because you never know. And the second part of it is on that trip and that journey, pick up folk. And that's kind of what I talked about on our 5-on-5 is that, and to your point, I gave up on money. We're broke. If anybody's got money for Urban League of Arkansas, I got a bucket in the back. But we've got to figure out how to do this without saying this is my norm. And so I think the process is recognizing that we have to fix this society. It's not just black males. What we suffer is a product of this society and has been and will continue to be until we as a society have a process that engages everyone. And so to your point, I think that's really the key. I think that we have to educate our young brothers and sisters to know that too. Don't always think of what the end game is because that's a limiting factor. Begin to think about what is the process, what's in the process of trying to get where we want to be, but being open on that trail. So I appreciate those questions.
And if I can just add to that, I think, you know, what you're saying highlights that we need better metrics, right? When we're designing programs, we're designing our evaluations and that sort of thing. We're looking at, you know, percent who use this program, these very measurable pieces, but ultimately what we want is for people to have better lives. So how are we measuring? These metrics that we have, the indicators we have, don't measure are people better off. And so I think we need to do better there.
So, how are you? My question is towards Elijah. When I look at Montgomery County, I see a lot of Nigerians, Ghanaians, Eritreans, Somalians, Ethiopians, immigrants, you know, who have their own problems. You know, they had colonization, you know, a lot of poverty-stricken, worst of the worst situation. I mean, to be quite frank with you. Then what kind of, things do you see that they face? Because when I compare immigrant population of that area, I see academically a little bit more success, but I'm pretty sure they have their own problems. But have you seen what problems they have? You know, could you give me a little on that?
I mean, again, I think you just laid it out. I think that people come with a diversity of experiences, right? And there's intersectionality in all of us, right? But I think the one factor that we all contend with when you come here, regardless of where you come from, is you're black. No one sees you walking down the street and says, oh, he's Nigerian. We're not going to stop him. We're not going to pull him over. Or he's Somalian. We're not going to jack him up. It doesn't work that way, right? We treat people based on how we perceive them, right, physically. And so I think, you know, for a lot of our brothers and sisters who are from other continents and other regions, that's a tough pill to swallow based on conversations that I've had with them, right? I've had plenty of conversations with brothers and sisters who are first and second generation African who are like, you know, frankly speaking, they'll say, I'm not black, right? Because where they're from, they don't consider themselves to be black. And so I think there's a rude awakening when they come here and they're lumped into this basket with quote unquote black folks, right, who are the descendants of slaves. So yeah, of course they come with their own, you know, experiences and difficulties and stuff. I think, you know, one of the things that we want to do in this space is we want to talk about the things that we share in common, right? Our humanity is something that we share in common. I always go back to you'll laugh about this, my favorite movie, Coming to America, right? And you think about the barbershop scene, right? Everybody's in there talking about all the same stuff, but you have people from different generations, right? Different backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And for me, this experience was very much reminiscent to a barbershop experience where you get all these brothers from different backgrounds, but everybody's getting their hair cut. It's been a while for me, to be frank with you, since I've been in a barbershop. I got hair, though, don't front. Like, come on, y'all. I just shave it at home now. I learned how to do it. But it's
you're not using Soul Glow, right?
No Soul Glow. But but it's a very unique experience where you come in and there's multi-generations and experiences and stuff, and you walk out with this education and enrichment. It's a rites of passage, so to speak, right, for many of us. And so this experience was much like that in many ways. But I'm hoping that what we do is we find the things that we share in common and we build upon those things more than the things that make us different.
One of the questions that we did receive in advance was thinking about how the project centered the intersection of identities, and if there were any lessons learned or any differences in defining well-being based on those different populations.
I can share from Baltimore what we experienced was, first of all, we had women in the room, and some of us were facilitators, and it was very clear, and we were told that changes the conversation, right? Having us present. And we don't take it personally either, but that it is what we agreed upon collectively is that who is in the room defines what the conversation is, right? And so what highlights is that these aren't one and done. There isn't one right model or one perfect model to these conversations, that there have to be spaces. If we had made it all men or all straight men or all men of a certain generation, it would have been a different conversation. And so it's important to continue to have these conversations and spaces where there can be different mixes involved for this reason.
Yeah, I'll touch on that briefly. We too had quite a bit of diversity, if you will, in the room, and I think that did have some impact. But we did that intentionally to some extent, because that is society. That is the reality. We do not have the luxury to expect to have the comfort of a all-black male environment consistently. And so for the process that we were doing, saying, this is it. And you've got to figure out some basics. Big things it was a trust factor. And we have to learn to find trust in environments that are not of what we would want to design, right? So you got to get that piece, the confidence factor. And so what we kept doing is trying to make sure that, hey, this is a space, keep it as safe as you can, kind of work through those pieces. But you're right. I think we, as black men, sometimes do have to make sure that we're willing to step out and say, yeah, it's risky. It's scary. It could come back and greatly damage your ego. It could damage your pride. It could create an environment where you feel less than what we have been defined to be. But we got to get over that.
Sorry.
So one of the things that I'm hearing is that community is very important and that these spaces are very important. I'm wondering if there are any existing spaces that folks brought up that they were connected to outside of this. I mean, I think when I think of my childhood, I think of Sunday dinner at my grandma's house, or I think about going to church, or I think about the barbershop. And as I've gotten older, that looks different now. And so I'm wondering what existing communities are people finding this outside of a Brookings Institute grant-funded organization?
Well, you hit three of them: the barbershop, the dinner table, church, HBCUs, the basketball court. Those were the ones that we found. We didn't talk about the country club. We didn't talk about the C-suite. We didn't talk about certain places that you would want that comfort. But you're right, that community is imperative. And I think that we have to, as black men, create those. I mean, that means that we do need to form organizations that work for us and that allow that community, because, the larger number of folk in this country, they commune. We just don't notice it, or we do kind of notice it. We just notice that we don't fit in.
Yeah, no, all I'll say is, again, one of the things that we were really intentional about was holding our conversations in different settings each time. So the first place that we held the initial conversation was in a church. We went to an art space. We went to a recreation center, right? And we wanted people to be comfortable based on their experiences. It was interesting, some of the perspectives that people raised based on the setting that we had the conversation in. And some of the memories maybe that kind of came up for some folks. I had a brother pull me aside after the initial conversation in the church, and he told me, frankly, he was like, I had some real bad experiences, and I've gotten away from the church, and like I'm not really feeling being in this space, right? So I had to assure him that we weren't coming back to the church, right? That we were going to do it in a different space moving forward. But what I find so unique, I think specifically about, and again, my experiences are that of a black person, because that's all I've been for 40 plus years, right? About black folks is that we create community no matter where we go. I recall a number of years ago with my son, he's in his 20s now, but he was maybe 5 or 6. and we were somewhere outside of Cleveland where there were very few black folks, and I was talking to a brother, whatever, and we talked for a good 5 minutes, and I got back in the car. My son was like, "Dad, where'd you know him from? Like, is that one of your friends or something?" I was like, "Nah, I just met him," and he was like, "I thought you knew him." Like, but we've had those experiences when we're in spaces where we're right. The in the few, and you see a brother on the street, "What's up, brother?" and stuff like, and we letting everybody else know too. We got each other's back. You know what I'm saying? In those spaces, so we carry community with us regardless of where we go.
I will just also add that everyone was not only supportive, well, in terms of thinking about different spaces, but also critical of those spaces in terms of being safe and vulnerable. And so that was another important thing that came up, even when talking and offering up different solutions and ideas for spaces. A couple more hands.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I participated in the Montgomery County conversations. It was awesome, and I'm hoping they all. I want to learn more about Baltimore as well, and Arkansas. But one of the things, all the positive connections, seeing folks from different generations there, was important because some of the discussions that came up were really important. One that stands out to me is for the first time, at least from my perspective, it was a conversation about safety and security. Whereas, kind of a few generations have taken for granted that, let's say, the federal government would protect the basic rights that we have, constitutional rights, First Amendment, right? But some of the conversations, at least towards the later meetings, were about physical safety, being protected, actually thinking about physical protection of the community, of ourselves. Should you own a weapon? Something I had never considered before. So this is the area that we're entering in, and it wasn't just me, it was other folks. It kind of resonated with me. So I just wanted to pose a question, right? Was that some of the conversation that was happening, and what were some other things that came out of the conversations that you didn't expect?
Well, yeah, that was a lot of discussion that came up, and again, it's the perception of what organizations and structures should have certain meaning, as you said, federal government being safety. Well, we didn't hear a lot of that in our conversations. We talked about, again, physical security, again, whether or not we feel free moving about our communities. And when I say our communities, we're talking about total, not just our communities. And it's an eye-opening conversation because you don't think about it. And one of the things that a lot of us talked about in our sessions when we got on the safety thing, it became kind of a normal thing that my neighbors that don't look like me, they don't walk around with some of those concerns of the things that are there. So again, it creates a whole new dynamic of that weight, that pressure that we've talked about, and how to navigate and move about in a free environment. And those are very difficult to manage. I have no clue how we address that, none whatsoever.
So what I'll say is absolutely it came up. It was in Baltimore, and it was one of the, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you think about well-being and self-actualization being at the top, safety is at the bottom. It's a basic need, right? And so we heard about that, and we heard a lot about boys in Baltimore who are navigating a lot of their basic needs, right? And so that piece around safety, around extra surveillance, around bearing the weight of policing, around housing, hygiene, all of these pieces came up as barriers. And I think that that's sort of where a lot of interventions need to focus is on, if you don't have housing, if you don't have a safe and stable home, if you don't have food, then well-being, you can't just jump to the top of the pyramid.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Who has the mic? Yep, go ahead.
First, just solidarity. There's a number of us who have found the same barber that you did over time. So we're good. Abdul Kareem Ewing Boyd, work in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education here in Washington, D.C. One of the things that I'm working on is some poverty mitigation work in a neighborhood in Southeast D.C. And I'm very interested to, y'all were talking about a need for a change in metrics if we're going to be looking for a way to find success in increasing well-being in the community, because we have to redefine what well-being is. What are some of the metrics that you would like policymakers to be measuring? Because I'm going to take notes and try to go write some policy.
Well, I would say that the first step with this is an understanding that folks have been studied enough. People are not guinea pigs. There are some things that we know work. If you're hungry, I'm not going to ask you 5 questions before I give you a plate. If we want to resolve that immediately, what are we going to do? You're going to eat, right? It's the same thing with guaranteed income. If someone is dealing with income volatility, how do you redress that volatility? You provide them with cash. There's no need to study that. There's been more than enough studies to date. But I would say that if there is a need to come up with some sort of empirical, way of addressing these things or metrics, the first step would be actually working with the folks who are our basis for the study and asking them to define the metrics in partnership with you, right? I think far too often we come up with metrics based on outcomes that we want to see that really has nothing to do with the end game, right? So I think we have to work within and with community around designing those metrics and evaluation standards so that we can hopefully get to this place where we can say, ta-da, this worked.
Yeah, and so that was a huge part of what we were hoping to develop as the project concluded, making sure that what we heard from communities was a way to be able to assess what well-being looks like for Black boys and Black men, and then also based on the policy recommendations to be able to track some of that progress at the local community as well. Maybe have one more time for one more question, and then, yep, lady in the orange. Sorry, Miriam.
Hi, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. My name is Afif Abdurrahman. I'm a gender equality and sexual and reproductive health practitioner, used to work for USAID, yada, yada, yada. So I had a question. I wanted to go back to the community question. And across the 3 contexts, Arkansas, Baltimore, and Montgomery County, I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how the online community came up in terms of whether it limited well-being or was supporting well-being, isolation and what that meant for boys and men, particularly young men. If you could talk a bit more about that, that would be great. Thank you.
So that came up a little bit with some of our younger participants, and I think you hit the nail on the head on both of them: isolation, but also access. The access being behind that technology, the ability to go deeper into conversations, be more confident in sharing who and things that are important to individuals, I think is fantastic. And I think that is part of our way and solution to some of the challenges that we see in our society, is being able to be connected in spaces to build that community more broader than you could do physically and geographically. So we heard that more from our younger folks. There was some conversation from some of our older folks. They struggle with everything AI and technology, but it was great conversation because what that did is it empowered the younger folks. So again, it's that process theme that I talk about, is that we have tools, we have resources. There are things that are out there, is that how do we use them? The metric question, and I appreciate what you were saying on that, is that, again, I think we have to step back and stop defining what those metrics are. We have been on a path in this country to create resources and access to tools and things that I think can help people find their spaces. We're seeing those reverse, and that's going to be a real challenge in our society, because you can't write policy to fix something. But if it's like putting a group of kids in a room with crayons and stepping back, what do they come up with? And a lot of times those things will be the solutions that we're looking for. And I think that, again, the online connectivity is, in my opinion, the way out.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, Scott, Tina, and Elijah, for this time. We have time for about a 5-minute break before we invite our second panelist up. So there are refreshments, restrooms. That way. Thank you.
Okay, that's right. You sent it to my email? Yeah. Okay. I'll make sure I reply though. But yeah, we doing this. We're doing the campus, we're not youth right now. We're doing something very similar from the youth all the way up to the seniors. Okay. All right, you got me. Okay. So like, now I was saying, like game time. Game time. This is my brother. How are you? Yeah, for sure, bro. I'm shocked you haven't connected us to this. All right. All right, all right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good afternoon, everybody. That was real weak. Peace and blessings, everybody. Okay, okay. This is like the afternoon time. We know what sometimes happens after 12, after 1, after folks get a little bit of a snack in them. But I assure you, we're not going to let that happen. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you all the second part of this conversation for today. My name is Sadiq Ali, based in Baltimore. Wear a lot of different hats, but today, most importantly, for the purposes of this conversation, had the pleasure of also serving as the moderator and one of the facilitators of the series of conversations that took place in Montgomery County. And I'm joined by some really dynamic brothers who are going to share both their experiences in terms of how those conversations went, but also we're going to yank on some of those threads in terms of also what we heard during some of those conversations. And so this part of the presentation is all about elevating the voices and experiences of Black men and boys to enhance well-being. And again, in that first conversation, we got to hear some really, really amazing commentary and conversation around sort of how it all went down and some of the organization and logistics and some of the strategies and decision-making that went into making those spaces really beautiful and authentic and welcoming. And again, in this conversation, we're going to be delving into, again, a good amount of what we heard, as well as we have a robust set of pre-submitted questions as well that, Lord willing, we'll have the opportunity to dig into. You know, but the only other thing I'll say before I set the stage, or to set the stage before I toss it to these dynamic folks to introduce themselves and also share a little bit about their role in bringing the conversations together, is that, you know, one of my favorite quotes is from Malcolm X. And some of y'all know this one, right? It's that even when we replace I with we, even illness becomes wellness. When we replace I with we, even illness becomes wellness. And we've already heard that as a consistent theme, that not only was the sort of setup for the research and to get so much of what was going to be powerful and impactful from a policy agenda creation perspective, but the conversations themselves ended up being so much of the cure that we sought. And so this idea of, again, moving from I to we was something that was a critical element that came up time and time again. And again, I just want to shout out Brookings. Can we make some noise for Brookings, y'all? Under the visionary leadership of Dr. Camille, Dr. Keon, right, and the rest of the Brookings team, again, just allowed us the latitude to make these spaces what they needed to be. And lastly, before I toss it, make some noise for yourselves for being out here today. Now, like, make some noise like you love yourself. Okay. Because there's a lot of places y'all can be. And my take is that if you are in this space, you love, you respect, and you want to see Black men win. Is that right? Okay, just making sure we're in the right place now. Okay. And so we're going to introduce themselves firstly with Brother Joe Hooks, representing 480 Club out of Montgomery County. We got Brother Montez Peterson out of Little Rock, Arkansas, representing Our House. And then we have Brother Jamar Wilson out of B-More, representing Roberta's House. So Brother Joe, we'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself, say a decent amount about your work and also your role in bringing these conversations together as we jump in? Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joseph Hooks. I created the 480 Club about 12 years ago, small business LLC. The roots of the organization name was the amount of minutes I first spent mentoring and training the young men. During a time that we felt, or I saw or know, growing up in the same community I served, where there was an access gap of opportunity to have a place for them to be seen, to be heard. And just being in the football realm, we could make $1 out of 15 cents. I had a turf size as big as this room, kind of like turf carpet,
and we had a space to just, 45 minutes of just physical training, just building them up, team building during the winter months, right? I saw and traveled the West Coast, the South, even other places, even DC, PG have many indoor spaces to kind of occupy. We have lack of that where I'm from, Montgomery Village, Montgomery County. And so the last 15 minutes was that social, emotional well-being support, having someone look like them that represented their goals academically, athletically, to come speak to them, give them life, speak life into them. And so it was 2 hours a week for 4 weeks. That's 480 minutes, and I felt like that felt strong. Since then, I've kept that root name, and I've done and grown into my upbringing. I grew up with my mom doing home daycare, childcare, and just through sports, I connected the two and used sports with youth development as a hook to really infiltrate myself into creating not only opportunities and fill the access gap, because I saw the lack thereof of not only male, but black men and black organizations being able to serve us and do us at a high quality. And so being able to partner with different and have contracts. And I would say just to lastly, through my work with the school system, nonprofit community is at one point I was told coming after college, trying to do everything I was supposed to do, right? Not check the boxes of lack of opportunity, was I didn't have a lot of experience and qualifications. So I said, I'll just show you. That's the life I live, a show and prove, turn perception into reality. And since then, everyone who told me I wasn't really qualified now fund me, besides the Collaboration Council, who've always believed in me and invested in seeing the work that I've done and being able to serve my county, not just boys, our girls too, but just really focusing on our African-American young men with positive development and sports community-based programs.
My name is Montez Peterson. I'm with Our House Shelter in Little Rock, Arkansas, where we pretty much partner with people to help them overcome homelessness. The unique aspect of that is that I never really thought about children being homeless. And you always drive by and you see adults when they're out there holding signs and living in tents of that sort. Never think about kids being in those tents or being in the cars, sleeping in cars and that sort. So I had a unique opportunity to work with children in a different type of aspect. So when I got there and I saw everything that was lined up and the resources that they had, I wanted to take the opportunity to reach out to kids, not only that were showing up at the shelter, but also in our community that were kind of lined up doing and going through some of the same things that I saw those kids that were coming into the shelter. So our house is kind of unique in that it's not just a place for you to come and get shelter and lay your head. They have a unique setup where when you come in, there's a program that you need to sign up for. So when you come in, of course, they're going to, what we call intake, they take you in immediately to give you somewhere to lay down, but they want to try to get you to be a part of the program where they're setting you up to not be homeless anymore. That requires you having stability. So when we set up the parents or the adults of these families, these kids, we're setting them up by getting them ready to go back in the workforce. We're setting them up being able to get their own housing again, getting their confidence in themselves back. And so those kids need a place to be while their parents are trying to get things together. So when we have those kids down there, it's an after-school program, but it's also shelter and a safe haven for those kids. So with all those resources that we have, I try to use those, which like I said, we have a career center where we're helping the parent get a job, but we also use it for the kids to take them over to learn them about the workforce as well. We have the after school for the curriculum part, and also the life skills treatment. So, but another aspect of it that's very important is that we have a mental health area, which to me is very important. When I first started working out here in the community, it was more about intervention. I didn't know too much about the mental health side of it, but our house gives us all types of things resources that we can use that's with mental health, workforce, life skills building, and also a safe haven for kids to come and have a safe place to learn and grow.
Montez, tell them quickly your role in the conversations as well.
Well, my role is that was kind of unique. I actually went back and forth between Big Brothers and Big Sisters and Scott Hamilton's Urban League. And I wanted to be a part of that because I felt like, as I explained just before, I had some different types of resources that I wanted to bring to the table that I wanted people to know about. But also, it made me want to invite other people that were not just your typical people that were considered leaders in the community. Like, for instance, we had security guards at the schools, that they see these kids every day, they know what they're going through. We had just people in the community that was working at the recreation centers. Just all people of all walks of life. I felt like it was very important because that's something you guys talked about before in the first panel, authenticity. You know, being authentic. People that are really on the grounds working. And I think that's part of a big thing that we need to have. Don't just talk about the work, do the work. So, absolutely.
No, I appreciate it. And we're gonna come back to how the composition, the makeup of the conversations impacted a bunch of what we heard. And I think Joe has some really, really interesting thoughts around that. So we're gonna come back to that. Brother Jamar, introduce yourself to the people and what role you played.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamar Wilson. I'm the Director of Operations and Program Director for Men's Mental Health Initiatives at Roberta's House. To sum it up, Roberta's House is a nonprofit located in Baltimore and Prince George's County where we provide free grief support services and wraparound services with case management as well as behavioral health services to the community free of charge. We have 10-week programs for children, adults, women, and specifically men-centered groups. And then we also have men's mental health initiatives such as men's mental health conferences that will be this Saturday that we host, and we provide free services, workshops, presentations, and connect services for men in the community, and especially Black men. So I had the luxury of being a part of this project and being able to be in this space. I think for me, serving and being a part of that is the very foundation of what we need. We need men that are in these roles, and we need Black men that are actually professionals and psychologists to start filling those spaces and show and give that support and have that representation. So I had the luxury of just being a resource in the room, in the discussions, the topics and conversations to help drive breaking the stigma behind mental health with men. So that was particularly my role.
That's perfect. I want to stay with you as we loop back around, and you just opened the door really, really beautifully, and that is, we know, like, anytime research happens, right, the researcher gets changed along with the subject. And so I'm curious, and again, you just opened the door. How did being a part of these conversations impact you personally? And maybe how has what you thought about well-being before those conversations may have shifted now that you were a part of those convos?
For me, I'm a resident and I'm born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. So a lot of the conversations, the discussions, and experiences that a lot of the gentlemen that was in the room advocated and voiced, I felt because I come from that same community. I've witnessed the same type of experiences and situations that they've been in. So just to see that cross-generational from men that was in a room that were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, experiencing the same type of experiences in different generations, it just shows the very need of having to reinvent the wheel, having to have these resources and have these type of projects happening to be able to create different initiatives, different roles, have different introspections and data to back those, so we can continue to go in the community and open up different practices, open up different nonprofits, have different fundings and different resources, and change kind of the trajectory and the approach that we have going into certain things and topics.
Same question for you, Montez. What did being in those spaces mean for you personally, right? As Elijah called out, we all Black men. We've been there for the whole of our time here on the planet. And so I know how those spaces impacted me, but I'm curious, again, how did being in the space impact you? And again, maybe how did your definition of well-being change maybe as a result of those convos?
I think the biggest thing for me, it uplifted me more. So many different men come from so many different backgrounds, and I never knew they were out there. But once we got together and started collaborating and talking, we were pretty much on the same page. We had different ways that we were trying to reach the goal, but we were on the same page. So it was all about trying to create some type of work plan to work together and see how we could bring something together as a focus on getting to that same goal. But I just felt like everybody had a voice. They had a platform. And so even the young ones, even the young guys that came in that, sometimes we, I'm old, but as elder people, we feel like we know everything. And some of these kids were teaching me things I had never heard of before, and I wanted more. So I wanted to have more armor and more tools to work with, to go out there and work with the kids. So it was very beautiful.
Same question.
To be in the space, so to be partnered with Collaboration Council, I didn't know who Brookings was till we were in the parking lot one day. Like I just had the trust because of the Collaboration Council and the consistency and thoroughness that they've already had in supporting and working with me to serve our community response to the needs. It came at a great time. Our county has shifts. Our country was going through things, and for me, being a black man, a black father, a black son, a black brother to other brothers of different mothers, leader of my organization, it was a place to, and a time for me to take that cap and roll off and be amongst the circle and be within. There was no hierarchy. I was transparent and with them, and so I wanted to make sure that we didn't overpromise, underdeliver. They had a strong voice in what it looked like, talking about like the church and different spaces. But it felt really good to me to release. And for me in Montgomery County, it was rare to see 40 black men, not in a deficit, to be together, to have conversation, hold a meal, and have a space for ourselves. And so I was able to share my experiences, but also listen that can help me drive the things that I'm doing. And I've done some things since then, and kind of affirmation of why we do what we do, for who we do it for, and just staying open-minded and being grounded is very key, and being humbled and just hungry to step up to the plate to drive some long-term or short-term policy, recommendations so that we can see some of the change. And as I always say, one day could do a lot, and just like one policy could change a lot of lives.
Man, I appreciate that. I want to stay with you, Joe, because again, Elijah, he opened the door for this during the last conversation as well. But I want to also give you some flowers, brother. Just watching your network, just like be present, just blossom. This brother knows folks that play Division I college football, basketball, all the way up to corporate lawyers. Folks in the corporate sector, state elected representatives, we're all in that space together for multiple conversations, which again, I think speaks to the depth and the breadth of your relationships, my brother. So I appreciate you. And so I'm gonna give some shine back to Elijah. Elijah put me on with Eugene Robinson's book called Disintegration. And put that in your reading list if you haven't. But in Disintegration, Eugene Robinson talks about the 4 different strata of black folks in America, right? The sort of abandoned, the mainstream, the transcendent elite, as well as the emergent class. And Joe, we had all 4 of those groups in the building during those conversations. So I want you to speak to folks about the importance of having all of those groups of black men together in the space, but also I want you to speak a little bit to the intergenerational nature of the group as well. We saw the chart from Keon during opening remarks just about the beautiful age distribution. So we have folks in that space from 18 all the way up to 70 plus years old. So speak to us about the importance of that sort of just mixed space across those different groups of black men, as well as the intergenerational piece and just like what that produced on the other end.
Yeah, going back to like the outcome, I didn't want to know the outcome. So I wanted to make sure the room was filled with all walks of life, a lot of different roles. So many came from my network. I'm very specific on asking either for help or very particular. So a lot of them said, hey, Hooks, text me, I got to go. But I was very transparent. We did use Collaborating Council's communication team to create a flyer because I wanted people that I didn't know outside my network too to show interest. But it was very personal and without any judgment, like you said, an 18-year-old who just came out with a gun charge to a 70-year-old preacher from a church. We had a elected official in the room that we didn't give any mic to. So, and I made it very clear, of that so that we can feel opening and safe and space to communicate. I mean, I think, as we have social media and just knowing people's walks of life, I felt like it was important to have all spectrums of pathways and no judgment to everyone could be heard and seen and learn from each other. And you'll see in the pictures, you'll have, someone who was a convicted felon talking to a program manager of, let's say, workforce opportunity, and they're exchanging numbers and creating, a new sense of brotherhood. So it was really a response to need. I will say, one of our sessions, 2 days before, I reached out to a young man that was on my mind. And then right before our session, he took his life. And so just being in the work, being in the field, being in the midst of the work, you think about, who needs a pick me up or just checking on them, but also who has a high role, a big role. A lot of our CEOs and big corporate people were saying they were tired, that they needed more spaces like this to express that and feel comfortable and confident at that time. So it was very important. It was humbling. It was reminding of me. I forgot who all I know, but I'm just so busy doing the work. And I think people saw the work in me and just felt safe. And because I felt safe with Collaboration Council, I felt safe with Brookings. And so I would have done this work for free, done a lot of work for free. It's sometimes better that way. But we did a lot of great work with not only feeding people and compensating them for their time, which is really an integrity part of Collaboration Council, which I am a part of, agree with. I hope that answers the question. I think it was just, in every session we had, I would say over 50% came to all four, but then every time it was somebody bringing another brother along. And some who couldn't make it, some reached out afterwards like, yo, I needed that, or I need this. This is the perfect time. And so it kind of came good trouble, but also I'll say good pressure, because you just never know what someone's going through. And some just needed to listen. Some just needed a hug. Some just needed, just to reaffirm and hear new ideas. And so it was beautiful. We're looking forward to getting together in September just to socialize without always asking somebody for something. Just how are you? And just see each other in a positive way is very key with some of the soft data that we need to make sure that we follow through on, because as a Black man and all the work that we do, a lot of times we get left at the end. And that's why, holding everyone accountable from Brookings, myself, with Collaboration Council, we're looking forward to making sure that this doesn't end with funding or not, and how we can kind of drive some of the things forward. And really it comes down to the spaces. Everyone was able to find different spaces and places, and just having those commonalities, right, not just deficits, to see, to learn from each other, to keep each other, in a wellness just as important, just as supported as possible.
Y'all make some noise, y'all make some noise. See, make sure y'all still awake as well. That was powerful, powerful, powerful. And I think, again, hopefully folks are taking notes in terms of, right, what are the characteristics to create these great spaces, intergenerational, across these different strata, right? Having an authentic, credible messenger to make the invite. That means a lot. One of the things we chatted about offline as well, Joe, was like, there was no hierarchy. Folks didn't lead with their titles, which is something that is so, so critical to just opening up the space. And as it was said in the first panel, that just allowed the conversation and the commonalities to shine through. And then once that's there, now we can open the door about sharing resources. So it was a powerful space. Brother Montez, same or sort of similar question for you. What did you see about the sort of composition of those conversations that you were a part of? And maybe as a result, maybe how did that impact the conversation that took place?
Are we speaking in terms of the age?
Age or any other sort of demographics from the groups of Black men that you were in a space with?
It was different generations. So the conversation was everywhere. And what I was surprised by was how hungry everybody was to learn something from each other. So whether you were a young person that was in your 20s or somebody in your 70s, it really didn't matter, because everybody was interested in what you had to say. So it was one of those things of just being humble and understanding that you need to come there to learn, and not so much to give your opinion where you wanted someone to take on what you believe. But it was more about getting clear understanding, getting transparency, what's really going on out there in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and just being sincere. And I think everyone did that, from the gatherings we had with at the Urban League and as well as Big Brothers and Big Sisters, it just seemed like everyone was interested, hungry, and so that's what I got out of it, and it just drove me to want more.
Jamal, jump in.
From our group, I found it very interesting because we had quite a bit of diversity. We had quite a few women in the room, quite a few gentlemen in the LGBT community. And it really just kind of gave a broad introspection on wellness is not linear. It was many different directions that people inquired and resources and particularly different type of situations and strategies that was brought to the table of how wellness can manifest and it should be in society for all people of color, especially Black men and people that identify that whether you were heterosexual or what you were non-binary or even from the LGBT community, of how first and foremost they identify I'm a Black man first and I identify as these things, and these are some things that compound with that I need to feel well. And I think what was real impactful and special was everybody kind of agreed on a quote I particularly shared that opened the door and continues to open the door why I want to step in these spaces and continue to advocate was I realized that wellness is usually identified as an individual thing. But when you start to look at the person next to you and everybody around you, if you're feeling well and you feel like you have good well-being, your wellness starts to deplete when you see the person next to you start to struggle. So I think that in the Black community amongst Black men, the key is to try to elevate and again bring people into the space to help them get to that space too, because that ultimately helps you stay well and connects you to a higher sense of wellness.
Community partners, y'all. Community partners, right? Y'all, I hope y'all are hearing a theme. I want to stay there with you as well, Jamar, because again, you opened the door for it. I didn't even tell you to, bro. It's like, right here. Tina spoke to it on the first panel, this idea of having the mixed spaces between men and women, right? We know for a fact that men need dedicated spaces to just be men. That came up time and time again during the conversations, quantitatively, qualitatively. And there's a space for the gender to gender dialogue as well. So I'm curious sort of your thinking on the time and place for those mixed spaces, as well as, the time and place to just have spaces for men, and maybe what are some of the pieces that came up in the conversation being in that mixed space?
I think it's definitely important for them to all to dwell simultaneously. As a Black man, I come from a Black woman, and a lot of my existence is centered around a Black woman. And a lot of my living in society is centered around a Black woman. So I think having perspectives from them and ideas from them is crucial because they're a part of our existence. We don't come here by ourselves. So I think having that space for them to open up and understand us, or for them to understand expectations and also understand different type of things that they even see in us. Because a lot of times when you're introspecting, you may not necessarily see a part of yourselves from another person's perspective. So it's good to have a man's perspective on these are the things that I go through and the things that I necessarily need to be well, and have somebody that's relatable, but also have a person that's looking at the internal details, the perspectives of you from a relational standpoint or a family member standpoint is definitely crucial for your well-being. Because I could be a man that dwells in my academics or dwells in my profession, and I'm well in that area, but I'm failing in wellness when it comes to my family dynamics. I'm failing in wellness when it comes to relational. So I think it's definitely important, and it should be spaces both have for those, and then it should be set aside to you're able to come into those. So a key thing that I ended up doing from last year when I did my men's mental health conference is we had quite a few women that just wanted to come as they were mental health professionals in these settings that wanted to come to just be in the space to just be there, to one, learn, but to also provide support. But I found it important and it worked well when I had components of workshops and presentations where we sectioned them off to get the same information, but as a group of women and then as a group of men, and then bring them together to have a think tank, bring them together to get different introspections and perspectives, because there is a certain sense of tiptoeing when your well-being or lack of well-being may be centered around relational dynamics. and you have women in the room and you're looking to have some type of validation from men, or just to even set out your grievances when it comes to your perspective, expectations, and your interactions with women, you tend to hold those marbles together. And then if, as a man, especially a black man, if that's your first time being in a space where you were actually coming to look to have that vulnerability and have that support, and as a woman there present, you're more reluctant to return back to the space because you're like, well, if I return again, what if another woman is there? And then it becomes a repetitiveness of uncomfortability and different things of that nature. So I think there's definitely a purpose to hold both spaces, but it definitely is a time and an effort that you have to be able to gauge and set aside for men to have just their space and coincide.
That's amazing, y'all. More best practices, right? More, make some noise, make some noise. More best practices, bro. Beautifully stated, right? Like, we don't want folks just observing us. Came up in the first panel. Folks have been observed and researched and studied enough. But if we're going to have legitimate exchange of dialogue and conversation, I'm even hearing a tinge of affirmation from our counterparts as well, which is something that, again, black men in many different settings don't get. And we heard that and through our conversations as well. And so, Montez, I want to go to you about some of your work in Little Rock, especially around engaging young people in a variety of circumstances, some of them, again, facing homelessness. What are those, techniques? What are you seeing work well in terms of engaging and sort of getting their thoughts out there as well? Because, again, a lot of this is around black men and wellness, but that has a trickle-down impact, right? As we think about black families and wellness. But, again, a black family can't be well without black children being well. So I'd love your perspective on how some of your work is shaping up and sort of what are you seeing that is working in terms of engaging young people in diverse populations?
It's a lot. The thing is that I've gone through so many different transitions. Like I worked with the Columbus Urban League in the aspect of intervention. Then I went from there back here for City of Little Rock. That was school. Then I went into our house, which was a homeless shelter with kids involved, rather. And then I went with Youth Home, which is a behavioral facility for kids. So putting all that in perspective, it's like I learned a lot about kids that at one point I had just had one aspect, which was being an interventionist and a mentor. So now I understand it runs deep. It runs very deep and a lot deeper than most of our mentors and interventionists and people that are out there working with our kids. They need to be educated on this. So the more I learn, the more I put in place, I want to go out and try to teach more people about what's going on with our children that are a lot deeper than what they see on the surface. So being in this realm of all these different things that are happening with our kids that I get to see on a daily basis, it has really, prepared me for all walks of life as far as where our kids come from. Our kids are coming from places that I just feel like if you're not prepared, you're not going to help that kid. You're going to add to that trauma. So I feel like, for me personally, that it helped me for me being involved in all the things I'm being involved in through the years of working with children, that I'm still learning and that the kids are still evolving, and we're going to constantly have to learn everything that comes forth within our midst with these kids. So.
I appreciate that. We're a couple minutes away from opening it up for questions from the audience, but I have two more questions that I want to try to squeeze in before we do that. And Joe, I'm gonna toss the first one to you, and that is around, we heard lots of big dreams. We heard lots of big dreams shared during those spaces, right? During our conversation spaces, and for me, a lot of them sort of centered around this idea that we can't realize a lot of these big dreams if our basic needs aren't met. And so I'd love you to sort of speak about sort of what we heard from the men in our spaces around that, and maybe any other sort of surprising things that sort of came out as we're thinking about this broad and sort of growing definition of what wellness means to Black men?
Yeah, in regards to what was said about their basic needs, being seen, heard, received, I think real quick on spaces, kind of drives in our community to drive and advocate for that. I always speak on the fact that being an African American man, we found more of a deficit to where we can find spaces to be, right? If you're homeless, if you don't have a job, if you're dealing with mental health crisis, or you're re-entering. But why can't we have a space where we don't have to fix those check boxes to just have a place to be? I remember just being on the Zoom with Mr. Hamilton, and I want to say, but like just having those lounges just to convene, be seen and heard. We're always kind of just navigating and trying to just survive. And I think we're looking to advocate to strive, not just, that gives us a sense of excellence and success to grow within ourselves and be with each other. But, it's going back to the core thing of, housing, economic opportunity, the jobs, safe space, but just within their organization that they're surviving in or leading, just to find other mechanisms to share or to be received for the things that they need. Mental health, things like that really came to mind. And one thing I just really want to quick on top of our moms, or just, we all come from that. Shout out to my mom is, that came up a lot as well. Our daughters, our family. And so I would say is, for me, when I created 40 Club, one of the actual real pivots, right, being unstuck, 480, as I was doing some research on that, 480 degrees is a full continuation, full circle and continuation. And for me, it was my mom actually who said to me one day, I love you, but I'm not proud of you. And that kind of really drove me to say, oh, I got to change the narrative. And then there's so many young men that I've tried to help and women through the programs. And so just piggybacking on how they have a part of us, our rib, our love, our first love, or even my daughter, who I'm making sure, and now I reflect, she's 3, but she hadn't seen me cry yet. I don't want to tell her I'm tired. And so they motivate us. And we talked about all the stressors and motivations that come from, our wives, our spouses, which is really, a proud thing, but also, sometimes, as people say, stressful. So, just going back to what they needed, it was just a no judgment space and a place to just convene and connect with others for any opportunity, any information, any affirmation at all was something that really was saying about their basic needs. Because a lot of times, I always tell some of my young people, when's the last time someone asked you, how are you? Not what can you do, how much reps, like people going to camp, what's your next report? But someone just simply said, how are you? And I think, and then with our circle, I remember specifically when we talked about our elected officials and representation, I would say 80% only knew of me, and I hold no seat. A lot of us, they didn't even know who their delegate were, who their senator was, who some people were African American too. And so that was kind of scary, but also hopefully we can drive that to make sure these communities and circles come together. I'm looking forward to bringing all this back to those platforms as well.
I love it. Brother Montez, what surprised you? Well, maybe what's one thing that surprised you from the conversations that you were part of in Little Rock?
That I didn't know everything I thought. And like I said, I think how willing everybody was willing to learn each other and come together and try to see if we can add to the table of all of us trying to be focused on the same thing. I think it was just beautifully done that everybody had a platform. That was so important, that everybody had a voice.
I just want to call that out, right, as one of the many, many myths and tropes about Black folks, is that Black folks don't come together to do positive things, that there's no spaces, right, that Black men don't want to come together and just just be in each other's company with no foolishness or no debauchery, right? These were conversations and spaces that men deeply, deeply desired, maybe didn't have access to, and poured into the spaces. So I just want to call that out, bro, and I appreciate you, because, again, that's one of the many, many deficits that we have to fight against as Black men, is many of these notions. But these men showed up willingly multiple times to share and to co-create the spaces that we were in. So, again, I appreciate you calling that out. Brother Jamar, anything surprising from the conversations that you want to call out for the people?
Not I wouldn't particularly say surprising, but what I did come to strongly, deeply realize, which I did have a realization of, was the sense of well community, and how that's the source of your well-being. I strongly feel like if you take let's talk about a black man right now, because that's what the premise of this obviously is. You take a well-being and a well black man, and you put him into a community that's unwell. How quickly will he become from a state of good well-being to unwell, to lack? And then if you take a person that same, or a man that has from a community that doesn't have well-being or poor well-being, and you put him into a community that has positive outlets for well-being, how long will it take that one man to now come from a place of not feeling well to a place of good well-being? And I think that's the deciding factor, and that's the pivotal part of this, because I had the experience of growing up in Baltimore City. Some sides of Baltimore City a little bit safer, and some not so safe, where there's gun violence every other night. And then as I got to adulthood, I had the luxury of living in other parts of Maryland that was very, very safe. And just my mentality of coming from Baltimore City and different organizations, different communities that were not safe, and then coming to a whole community that gun violence was maybe once, crime was maybe once out of the year, how quickly I felt much more naturally safe, and my well-being just completely elevated just off of the environmental change. And then now I'm living back in the Baltimore City, how quickly more and a lot more fast than it took me to come from a place of kind of being at a mindset of gotta, watch my back, gotta make sure when I'm coming out of my car, gotta make sure my house is locked, and different things of that nature. How quickly I came out of that realm of when I moved from a safer community or a safer neighborhood, so to speak, back into a place where it's closer to gun violence and crime, how quickly that unraveled. And I think that's the importance that I really got and I understood when I was in the room and hearing those conversations of certain people coming from different demographics, different parts of the city of Baltimore, and sharing their experiences of where they were mentally and how they were wanting to achieve wellness, but ultimately they're going back to communities that are food deserts. They're going back to communities that have high crime rates. They're going back to communities where they're maybe come out and they're experiencing recidivism and coming out into trying to be a different citizen than they was when they went into incarceration, and how it's such an uphill battle and a lack of resources and a lack of respect for a person and a black man coming out that wants to change their lives. And then the mentality of them having that mindset of, I want to be well, I want to do this, I want to live a positive life, I want to be on a trajectory that's upward, how quickly that shifts when they're in society and they're in communities that has no resources or has an uphill battle for them to get there.
Wow, wow. Powerful, powerful. Make some noise, y'all. Make some noise. We're going to keep the conversation rolling. One final question before we open it up to the audience is, and again, brother, you did this 3 times in a row, and I think there's a little bit of a hint in here that I'm going to pull out, and that's around this idea of spirituality as being a key component to wellness and well-being for, again, black men, black families, young black men, et cetera. And so I'm curious how each of you all heard the elements of spirituality sort of show themselves, or how those might have come up in your conversations as again, a critical element of wellness.
I mean, sometimes, just being in the circle, you just kind of, I don't say get into the weeds, but I mean, everyone was safe, eventually got safe to, share what that meant to them, what it looked like for them. I think, our goal was to stay open-minded to what everyone said, no judgment. I mean, as a facilitator, they did a great job, receiving what people said. But I mean, it was just so many things. It's been a little bit of time now, but, I think it was a key factor. I'm not kind of necessarily memorizing or remembering everything that was kind of shared on that aspect, but it was definitely brought up. And, I think I know we ended more so on policy versus programs, but kind of in the middle, I think it was a key factor to discuss.
What I realized with the spiritual component was one of the gentlemen in the group, and I remember this story very, very deeply. He had the opportunity to remove himself from Baltimore, I believe, go to California. And while he was here in Baltimore before he went to California, he stated that he carried, I believe, a rock or a crystal that was associated with safety. And he said he carried it because he experienced so many friends, family members who lost their lives in Baltimore. And when he went to California, he was in a whole different environment. He ended up losing that safety crystal or rock, and he felt like he didn't need it anymore because he was in a safer place, because he was in a better community, in a place where he was able to let his guard down and be able to be vulnerable where he was internally and address the issues that he had within himself and in a spiritual level. And then he said when he returned back to Baltimore, he craved that rock back because he was re-entered back into the places where he had the trauma, back into the places where he felt like he needed something extra, some spiritual connection, something deeper to help him stay safe and be in a place that he desired to be.
I wanted to hear both of you guys first because that was an intriguing question and I didn't hear any conversation about that in both areas. So that struck me as odd that, now that I think about it, I didn't hear much about it. So it was, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that we're getting farther away from the spiritual aspect of things or if it's more about what's out there in the community that's happening in your face.
Real quick, now that I reflect, one of the brothers, my good friend Clinton Scott, always said to me, even in that moment, was you can always pray wherever you're at. If I'm sitting here in this panel real quickly, and so I think when people felt either trapped or not seen or heard, that was the place they could go to just to kind of get through that day and time, was to just have an opportunity. If it's going to, a walk, a lunch break, just really was talking about just being able to pray and just kind of be in that space, just to kind of really escape at that moment, whatever they were surviving in. And that's why we think, being able to have those spaces to strive is, being in that spiritual place of well-being within themselves. And like I said, it spreads amongst others. And so even just going to a brother, hey, can I pray for you? Or just seeing people do that. So that definitely came up. If it was a scripture that people refer to all the time, like I have one on my arm, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid. God will be with you wherever you go. But everybody had their different walks of life and spirit that they had as a hook, as a foundation that people spoke on to kind of survive, the walks in life of their role, just being a black man.
Give these gentlemen a round of applause, please. I appreciate y'all. So we got a few minutes for some audience Q&A, and if we go down a rabbit hole or enter into a lull, again, we have several questions that, again, I want to acknowledge were submitted beforehand that we haven't been able to get to all of those yet, or many of them. But again, there were some really intriguing questions on there. I see my brother Sean here.
How you doing? My name is Sean Burnett. I work for the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore. I've been in the space. Sadiq, I've had the privilege to be at the MoCo Collaboration Council with Elijah. Got quite a few colleagues here. GW, Greater Washington Urban League, and the Fatherhood Initiative there. I'm familiar with them. So in this space, I have some familiarity. I'll put it that way. My question to you all, because you seem to be on the front lines of these things, as black men feeling like you're alone in a lot of spaces, feeling like you don't have the ability to be vulnerable because you are seen as weak or less than, was there some hesitation in trying to get individuals to come to these groups just to talk? I know the brother from Arkansas, you said you deal with homelessness. You deal with grief counseling. You deal with a plethora of things that help people in general. So you're giving them something in return for their time or their efforts. Was it hard for them to just be vulnerable or come and sit somewhere to try to speak? And I'm saying this for the crowd to understand that, yes, these things go on often, but there is something that normally undergirds, and it's the relationships with the individual. It's the trust, and I know that X, Y, and Z, or I know this person from the street, and a level of loyalty. So while it does happen, I want you guys to hopefully speak to any hesitation you may have gotten from participants because of just life, because of the societal ways that they look at men, or how we can't go to our homeboys at times. Or I have a best friend for 20 years and stuff that we grow up in the same house. There are many things we don't know about each other just because we may not feel safe to talk about it to our best friend. And so, like, I wanted you to speak on that, and to Miss Tina's point about process, because it takes a long time. So maybe the process needs to be elongated for our guys, because trauma is over 400 years for our people. And so, as and I will end with this. Robin, I can't remember his last name. It's a professor from Oxford University years ago, came out with a study that men, for well-being purposes, need to meet with other men at least 2 times a week. It will literally help lessen anxiety, help strengthen your immune system, and it even helps bolster gratitude in a lot of instances. So those are just 3 main things that came from that study. But like, I'm glad we have this group here. Well, we on the ground. Brookings can talk to people that we don't get to talk to on a daily basis. So like, this is definitely an opportunity and a space for this conversation to be had. So thank you.
That's dope. That's dope, Sean.
I think initially people may have come in a little apprehensive, but I think what ultimately broke the ice was that, first of all, the setting. The setting was that everybody had a voice right off the bat. So, and when Scott or whoever it was that was speaking at that time, it made you feel like, finally, somebody's going to listen to me. So it wasn't one of those situations where you were trying to be politically correct or anything like that. It was more like, hey, man, what is going on in your world? And so when you were given that, you just opened up. You didn't think about who you were talking to and who you were around or none of that. It was about, finally, I got a chance to tell somebody what I really think.
Yeah, thanks. I would say setting the stage, being involved yourself. I did have a couple who declined. One, after the first session, when we saw 2 Caucasian women in the room, they're like, you know what, Hooks, like, I'm good. So not taking it personal, respect that, let them do their thing. And I'm glad that Brookings and the Collaboration Council, we convened. We always kind of huddled afterwards beforehand, kind of self-evaluating to make sure. Also, credit to Sadiq and Dr. Miller for really doing a good and investing a lot of time on the icebreaker. If it's sharing a piece that means to you and talking about that, a probing question, non-judgmental, we set the foundation in the room. You get one time for a first impression. We were in the church, so it was a little hot, but the food was good. It was a little late, but it was great. Shout out Bama Barbecue. So, just showing that you're real, you're not perfect, but you mean well. A lot of it was just watching my walk of life, and it took me a lot of time. It took me text messaging at 11 o'clock or kind of reposting and just being involved and not just talking down to them, talking with them, not tokenizing them. Many of them didn't realize, and me and Elijah didn't put it on the flyer, after the good meal, they didn't realize until afterwards they were going to get some compensation for their time. They're like, Hook, some of them tell you, I don't need it, I don't want it, right? Still just followed up. We did satisfaction surveys on a general basis. We evaluated that, coming from that sports aspect. But I think just seeing and hearing, not knowing the dynamics in the room of hierarchy, power dynamics, that kind of going back to, what my man said about, it was contagious. It was therapeutic. It was at a needed time. Some guys got a lot emotional. I mean, I got emotional. I got upset. People just wanted to say something out loud real quick, or just say, I'm tired of faking it in front of white people. I'm tired of changing my voice to be in a meeting. And it was just really like everyone I saw just didn't want it to end. And it was just really rare. So, I think just to answer your question too, like it took time. We did lose some, but we gained a lot more. And, I think as a leader, we got to plant the seed, and we got to just be able to, in this foundation, like I don't say the pressure, but the opportunity to recognize that and use that in our driving forces to be maybe impacted in our advocacy and in our policy.
For my group, I realized it was two-sided. I feel like because there were women in the room, there was a hesitancy to open up and to be vulnerable, to be taught, because one, it was already a sensitive space of, do I feel weak? Do I present myself as weak by talking about certain issues? What I would say the light side of that was the women in the room quickly went into places of validating as people shared, and it was contagious. As soon as a person opened up and started talking about their despair and the things that they carry, it promoted for other men to then step up and then say things. And then what I thought was beautiful as well is the women in the room started to realize that they heard a lot of what was being said from their partners. And then they took back and said, now I know how to go home and adhere to what he's saying, because to me it was individualized. To me it's just him having this experience. It's just him having this situation. But to hear a group of men go through the same things and have the same experiences and the same grievances, it opened their mind to, this is a epidemic type of situation. This is an epidemic type of feeling. And then the flip side to that was, I think also when the men had the position where they realized they all wanted to share. They all came there because they was hoping for that space to be able to be vulnerable and to be validated and to not be looked at as weak. But what happened and what I realized was, because they haven't had that normalized and had that space quite often in their life, they struggle to even advocate for themselves and even open up to talk about the depths of what they felt. They could not pin or put words to what they actually wanted to say. And I think that was a struggle and a disservice within itself, because once you get in that space and you're actually provided the opportunity to do that, do you really get to the place to say the things and advocate and actually express the things that you feel the way you need to express it to actually release and get to that wellness? And I think that's why it's important to continue to have those spaces, to have that practice and those opportunity and those reps. Similar to him with being in sports, repetition breeds perfection. Repetition breeds excellence. So for us to start to communicate what we feel and get to a place of wellness, we have to have those spaces for us to have those repetitions to do so.
Hi, my name is Raman. I'm from the American Institute for Boys and Men. Thank you guys so much for your reflections. I thought they were really, really helpful. I kind of want to follow up from the previous panel. The professor here asked the question about the erosion of Black male civil society. And I was wondering, in the course of your conversations, were there any particular institutions that men especially really missed? Like, is it churches? Is it, volunteering at schools? Is it, like my boss talks a lot about Big Brothers and how long the wait times are for kids to get those male mentors. So I'm curious, like, were there particular institutions that people were like, oh man, we really miss going to that?
Real quick, I mean, just coming from a student athlete background, a lot of them refer back to their coaching, their team aspect career. So as sports always come to an end, at least at it doesn't really come to an end in some way, the competitive level from high school, a little in college, and maybe the pro. I know there's a lot of like adult leagues, men leagues, but they missed that core thing. And I always did well by having that coaching team mentality, why I really took education seriously, why I had that show improve. I mean, even with that, I've had a lot of great, I'll just say Black coaches, but a lot of my most influential coaches have been white men that have really helped me. So I think just being in that space of, well, basically when I saw that gap, when my mom said what she said, when I was not on the team, when I kind of was just floating and I'm just kind of getting absorbed with just kind of what's out there. I graduated during the recession. I'm like, I did everything I was supposed to do. I ain't getting nobody pregnant. I got a degree. I ain't getting locked up. I ain't got no mental health crisis. And then I just was like at lost for a while. And I just started now to have that adrenaline rush. Instead of going down the kickoff team, I'm going to the casino, right? Instead of, just finding it in different realms. Now, eventually, it just, I had to hit rock bottom or, get smacked and just kind of reset myself. And so the sports and the spaces to have that, and that's what's talking about my county, that, I won't say institution, but that foundation, a lot of times I've seen, and many of the kids I work with now that are either incarcerated or dead have lost being a part of that team. So helping them transition into workforce, into other, job readiness skills so that they can continue. And for me, like I work now with another nonprofit, and I'm the only male and I'm the only Black man. And so I'm doing some teamwork stuff, but I mean, I feel alone in the space to, who do I talk to in between these meetings just to reflect on all the different metrics or emotion. And, that's why I'll text and call Elijah any time of day, and just because he's a funder, but he's a partner, he's a big brother. and it just trickles down, and people reaching out to me. So creating that village of continuation is a part. Taking coaching and giving coaching is very key.
For me, I think a lot has been lost in us not having as many recreation centers and just places for the kids to go and be kids. I think a lot of it has to do with social media and things that we have, gamings and stuff like that, where kids are not wanting to go outside as much anymore. But I think we need to reintroduce outdoor things to kids and get them wanting to go out and learn things hands-on. More camping, more Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever that is. Get out there and learn some things of substance, and not so much things just for entertainment. I'm sorry. Someone raised their hand.
Did Jamar want to finish?
Similar to what you just said, was definitely hinting on rec centers and them being closed. But I think what was also hinting on was like community events, community block parties, and different things of that nature, and the importance of community homeowners associations and different things of that nature to draw the community together has been at a deficit, especially in Baltimore City. And their presence, I think, was definitely talked about a lot of what was no longer in existence, or definitely a reduction of within the communities.
I'll just add one more, and again, I know we're basically at time, y'all. So there's one more hand. I think that's going to be our final audience question. But I would also reframe that. So I think there are some things that may have been lost, but there are also, I think, came up in our conversations, are what are those institutions or outlets that we have the opportunity to bolster, and those like institutions that are working well. So Black fraternities and Black Greek life, that came up. Some of the work that we're involved in Baltimore, right? African-centered and culturally relevant rites of passage experiences, right? Have the opportunity to be bolstered. Adult men sports leagues, right? To Sean's point, having the opportunity for men to just convene and just like do the stuff, right? And also the spirituality that did come up in our conversations as well, right? Be that Bible study or classes at the local mosque or what have you, as further opportunities to be bolstered in terms of those spaces where men can go and be men, especially from a Black male cohort perspective. There was one more question before we wrap this thing up. We over time, y'all.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. OK Enya. Just quickly, plug, I am writing my second book. It's called the John Henry Health Equity Playbook. It's a 4-year health policy agenda for Black men. I'm going to launch it this fall here in the DC area. My question is, what do we do in between the rec center, the church, the frat meeting, etc.? How do we equip and empower, serve as a model for self-care and soul care? Journaling, breath work, acupuncture, chiropractor, gym, reading, traveling, music, etc. What do we do between the community settings is my question. Thank you.
I'll quickly say, I know Montgomery County, many of our schools are coming community schools, and they've implemented wellness trainers. Many of them have, men, women, just kind of introducing those practices and those opportunities from a school base. Many of our kids are in school most of the day, but obviously, my work now is 0 to 5. It starts really early, is modeling that. So really just introducing, I know in Montgomery County, we have the African American Health Program, which tries to create and educate parents on those things. But it comes back down to a lot of like funding to be able to bring that in. I have a mindfulness partner, Jared Parks, who has his practice, and he's always, we integrate him into our curriculum-based programs or in our sports programs, just the deep breathing, understanding how that can impact your wellness. So I love the idea you said, but I think it starts at that foundational level, obviously with our parents, but in the settings that they're going to be in most of the time, which is either childcare and then this education setting. And so really taking this back to our superintendents, our public school system, of the importance of inputting this into advisory periods, wellness time, to introduce them to that, so they're not just finding out about that, after 24 years old, when they've kind of exited out of the systems of access and opportunity. And so for me, through my work, I've been introduced and open-minded to, you know, just some of those things that you've expressed. So I think it's very important. But a lot of times I see the resistance, but I think we, like someone said earlier from Arkansas, we just got to show and prove and do it ourselves and use the circles that are already created and do it there. So then those systems can now, oh, we did our research, we see it works, and then they want to hop on. So just kind of be what we want them to, be what, the change already.
I think at our house, like I said, we had a lot of resources, and I have a lot of resources. And one of those is some of the stuff you were speaking of. We have yoga for the kids. We have meditation for the kids. We have just some therapeutic type things that we do for the kids to get their minds off of just the everyday life of going out there and doing things people require of them, just for their own space, for them to be able just to be them. So I get what you're saying. I feel what you're saying. And I think that places like our house, we need more of that implemented. But then we got so many guys. We have so many different organizations out there. I think we have to get more involved. We have to come off our pedestals and go into these organizations and work with them. And we can bring these things that we're talking about right now, yoga, mindfulness things and all that, and they'll be out there in the community, just not in our own space.
Last word, brother.
I would definitely say that the biggest in between is social media. I think that as we're doing a lot of these events like this, yoga, mental health events, men's wellness groups, that we have to flood the social media with those, because the more that you flood that, it changes the perspective. Social media is automatically going to push what is viewed the most. And what is viewed the most is going to be the trendiness or the standard of society. So really, we have to get into that space where a lot of, especially in the Black community, the negative side of things are promoted and pushed, and start to reinvent that wheel and push out more positive stuff, more stuff that bring unity, more stuff that are about mindfulness practices, well-being, and continue to feed society and feed social media that, forcing people into expanding their horizons and seeing this repetitively. The more you see something about your brain starts to program itself and start to, it's called neuroplasticity and neural remapping. So your brain is automatically going to do that, whether you're depressed, whether you're Black, white, or any other race or creed. If you have a brain, even if you're an animal, is going to do that. So in society, I think that we really have to leverage using and just pushing social media to put these type of situations and these type of events and these type of occasions at the forefront. And eventually it'll turn its wheels and completely 180 the thing, I think. So.
I love that, this idea of, again, exposure, personal practice, normalizing these things, including therapy for Black men as well. Y'all make some noise for these panelists, y'all. And with that, we're going to conclude this portion of the conversation. I'm going to toss it back to Dr. Keon and Dr. Camille to wrap us up, y'all. Thank you all.
So Sadiq, huge thank you to you as well. Thanks. Everybody join me in thanking Sadiq.
And I want to shout out my my co-moderator for our conversations, who's with us in spirit, Dr. David Miller. Again, one of my big brothers, one of my mentors. Again, we wanted to model that intergenerational piece as we facilitated our conversations as well. And again, just shout out to everybody here in the audience, watching online as well. We appreciate your interest in our cohort.
Thank you. So I'll let these gentlemen please stand up. And again, a huge round of applause for you. I just want to say none of this work would have been possible without the fantastic partners that we had, without the funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and without the fantastic work that was done by all the folks who work in these organizations and our great research team as well. The most important thing for us was that we started something really meaningful and important. And the most important result for us will be that each of the communities that participated in this work continue to move forward on the path that was started. And that, I think, for both Keon and I, is probably the most most meaningful part of this work.
Yes, absolutely. Hello. Yes, first I want to echo all of the thanks that Camille has offered. This has been an incredible project. It was an ambitious undertaking from the beginning, and I think that we are both proud of both the process and the outcome of this work. And in terms of thinking about what this continues to look like, it certainly requires collaborations and partnerships and resources of different kinds, but also to sort of really think about how do we reimagine the narratives and the programs and the services and policies that are inclusive of Black men and boys. Many participants talked about it's not an absence of policies in and of themselves, but an absence of how Black men and boys have been included or excluded from these policies, and sometimes even programs and services. So I think sort of continue along on those themes and sort of, again, just pushing this work forward and imagining what is next. I think we can sort of really build a next generation of policy programs and services that better serve Black men and boys.
And thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank
It's
you
been a
all.
pleasure.
Can we have the panelists and the Brookings team come up?